Okay. So, welcome to our podcast. I'm Eric Brownson,
I'm Jonathan Cole.
and we're here today to talk to you a little bit about prisons.
Yep, that's it.
Prisons and money.
And money.
Oh, and gripe about politicians, too.
Well, that's a
Yeah,
given.
I mean, that's got to happen. So, welcome to America, land of the free, home of the brave,
Sure,
something like that. We have a lot of prisoners.
we do.
You know, if you look at the world's population, we've got about 5% of it, but we've got about 1 in 4 of its prisoners.
Right.
25%.
Right, and with the average prisoner costing $34,000,
That's expensive.
It
Jeez.
is. It is. And so, what are our problems with the prisons? Prison reform is kind of a hot button topic, and there are really three things that we need to talk about with prisons.
Mhm.
The first part is, why do we have prisons? So we have prisons for two reasons. The next part is, what are we going to do with our prisoners? Why do we keep them? How are we going to treat them when they're there? And the third part is, what's the goal? What's the burden?
goal of
And
prisons, yeah.
is the burden outweigh the benefit? So why do we have prisons? There's really two factors. It's malum se and malum prohibitum.
Well, those are the two types of crime, right?
Well, it
Yeah.
is, exactly. And so a malum in se crime is something that's inherently evil.
Like Illinois politicians.
Right, exactly. But beyond Illinois politicians, it's something that's inherently evil, like murder, like rape, like theft. You don't need a law to say that that's inherently bad. You just know that it is. And that contrasts with malum prohibitum.
Mm-hmm.
Malum prohibitum is, we'll create a law that says you can't do this. And
Right.
it's not inherently evil.
Right.
It might even necessarily be bad in some circumstances, but it's not inherently evil. And a perfect example is driving on the wrong side of the street. If the street's wide open, there's nothing wrong with driving on the wrong side of the street. There's no one you can injure by driving on the left side of the road. in the
If there's
US.
nobody else there.
Right. And
If
so-
you slam into another car, that's a malum in se, right?
well, it depends. Not necessarily. But
So it's not inherently evil to slam into somebody else's car because they're there?
if you're doing it intentionally, then probably it is.
Okay.
Um,
But it's just because you're driving on the wrong side of the street, it's not inherently evil. It's just
Right.
you're doing something stupid.
Right. So malum prohibitum and malum se are really two different fundamentals in someone's psyche, why they're doing what they're doing, and why they're being locked up.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to the two different parts of prisons, the purpose of prisons, which is our second portion of it. Prisons serve two main effects.
Right.
The first, obviously, is a punishment. So just like as a little kid, you got spanked or sent to timeout, it was a punishment for what you did.
Or in my case, I didn't do enough chores around the house, so I had to watch a chick flick.
There you go. The second one is it's a oh boy, my brain just died out. I'm thinking about you watching a chick flick.
The comedy of errors, right?
I would say so. All right. So in addition to punishment, it's supposed to be rehabilitation.
Right.
And so while you're in prison, you're supposed to reform your actions and thoughts and become a more productive member of society.
Well, and I think that's the most important role that prisons can serve.
And I think that's true partially. So if you have someone who has a malum prohibitum, let's say they're driving on the wrong side of the road, but they pose no risk to society, and you imprison them for that action because it's technically against the law to drive on the wrong side of the road.
Right.
You really don't need to rehabilitate that person. There's nothing inherently evil they're doing. Their intent is not to harm someone.
Right.
But if you have a malum in se crime, like murder, your intent is to be bad, and so there must be some rehabilitative factor
Right.
regarding that. And I think that's our fundamental problem in prisons to begin with. We treat all prisoners quasi-similarly, and I don't think that's necessarily the best way to go about it. But additionally, I don't think necessarily prison is the proper function for someone who commits a malum prohibitum crime.
Right.
I think there are other ways to either punish or rehabilitate, depending on what the crime was, but primarily to punish.
Right, and it doesn't have to be something that's a huge drain on our country,
Mm-hmm.
like sending them into prison is.
Right.
$34,000 a year. I'd rather not spend that for somebody who just drove on the wrong side of the road.
Sure.
They should be out making money, paying taxes, paying their dues some other way.
Well, and obviously we use driving on the wrong side of the road as kind of a joke. The
Mhm.
primary is marijuana use. People are being locked up
Yeah.
for marijuana, and
Left and right.
it's really a malum prohibitum crime. Smoking marijuana or any drug inherently is not evil. So some people are addicted to it, some people do evil things while on it,
Yeah.
but it's not an inherently evil thing.
Right.
It's an intoxicant people choose to use, just like alcohol is, or cigarettes, many other intoxicants. So that's kind of what we're referring to, but to kind of steer away from the hot button issue, we don't really want the topic here to go into whether drugs should be legal or illegal. That'll be a topic for another video. This one's primarily on prisons. So that's why we use this wrong side of the road argument. So at $34,000 a lockup, a prisoner, and 1 in 104
like
are in
100,
prison.
104 or 107.
107.
Something
Even
like
if
that.
it's 100.
We'll round it to 100.
Yeah, if it's 1 in 100, I mean,
That's a lot.
$34,000 for every 100 people they have to pay towards towards prisons.
So, there's kind of two different ways I look at that. The poverty rate in the U.S. is what, 17 grand?
Okay.
That's exactly a factor of 2. So if you took the minimum amount of money it takes to feed and clothe, I think it's a family of 4.
Okay.
You could do that for 2 distinct families for the cost of a single prisoner.
Sure.
The other way I look at it is, I'm a taxpayer. Not like most of people out there, but I do pay taxes.
Okay.
That's another topic for another day, by the way, but if you came up to me, so in the U.S. the average amount of income is about 50,000.
Okay.
52,000, something like that. Maybe it's medium, maybe it's average. I don't remember specifically. We'll just round it to 50 grand.
Okay.
If you came up to somebody and said, give me 2/3 of your income so I can lock that other person away for doing something stupid, even though he poses no danger to you or anyone else, I'd tell you to go to someplace warm with lots of fire and people with goat legs.
Sure. No, I think that's a great point. So, prison reform, I think, has multiple parts to it. And I think the first is, what is an appropriate punishment for people who commit malum prohibitum crimes?
Mm-hmm.
So, legislation reform is another topic, but let's leave legislation as it is. They commit a malum prohibitum crime, driving on the wrong side of the road, smoking marijuana.
For those of you who want to look up other articles on this, just look up non-violent crimes.
Basically, that's what it amounts to. So, if you have someone like this, prison, I think, should be the least desirable option.
Right.
Although it's going to get the punishment effect, that punishment effect can also be achieved without such a great strain on the economy of the American people.
Yeah.
So you can have them doing community service, and substantial portions of community service where they live at home, they're responsible for their own welfare, but they have to work 3 days a week, let's say, for the community, or they have to pay substantial fines as a result, or they have to lose all but their basic necessities. It's auctioned.
And I think you're onto something there, that community service aspect of it. They're doing something that directly benefits the community.
Sure.
They're giving the community value.
Right.
They did something wrong, they're paying for it, and the community is getting something out of it. The community isn't losing something, and they're not losing something.
Right. No,
It's a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
But, that begs the question, why do we have so many prisoners? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that revolves around legislation reform, but also the privatization of prisons.
Yes.
So, prisons inherently were a governmental function, and they eventually became privatized. Privatization of prisons made a monetary component the primary motivating factor for these prisons. So, in order to guard a child sex offender, you have to spend lots more money on rehabilitative costs and on prison guards and other factors that would allow them to be incarcerated both safely and safe for the guards and safe for the inmates. So it's a much higher cost.
And just so you don't get the wrong idea, we're saying they should go to jail.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Good. Just want to make sure that's explicitly clear.
So, but for someone who, let's say, would be arrested for driving on the wrong side of the street, or for driving
10 miles an hour over the speed limit?
Sure.
We would never do that.
No, or for having a few joints of marijuana with them.
Right.
That individual requires very low supervision. And
Right.
so you could have much more prisoners per prison guard, and it's a more cost-effective way of doing it. And so it's beneficial for private prisons to encourage lockup for those who are in a more cost-effective manner.
Well, it's also not just more cost effective per prisoner. It's a way of just generating more prisoners in general.
Right.
I mean, if you can
Well,
make
a prisoner would equal revenue for a prison.
right.
Yeah, so I think that privatization of prisons has changed somewhat, either for legislation or for the judiciary branch, their motivation of using punishment in prison as opposed to non-prison punishment as a deterrence for
Yeah. And
behavior.
we also talked a little bit about before that every politician wants to be tough on crime.
Oh, absolutely.
And this constant drive to be tough on crime or to have to appear tough on crime, even if they don't care,
Right.
also ends up with a lot of laws that generate a lot of prisoners.
Or if being tough on crime doesn't do anything to solve the problem.
Yes.
So, and we'll talk about this another day as well. But okay, so if you outlaw or ban guns, okay, it's not
Scary thought.
It's not going to necessarily reduce the gun violence of the individuals who are already breaking the law to have guns. And so, by creating certain legislation, it's not necessarily going to alter the behavior, but it's making it seem as if a politician is taking steps to alter a behavior, like they're acting proactive, even though the action will give nothing toward the desired effect.
So, these would be those politicians that stand up in front of a wall full of assault rifles that almost never get used in crimes, except for the one or two sensational crimes a year.
Right, absolutely. But again, gun crime is not our issue today, it's prison. And so I'd also like to remind you that you'd really help out the channel if you could hit that subscribe button. If you could like or comment down below, that would appreciate it. Additionally, if you can comment on future topics you'd like us to talk about, we'd be happy to. Or if you have an opinion on the issue of prison reform, we'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah.
What else would you like to talk about with prison reform?
So, we talked about prison reform.
Sure.
I've heard you discuss a few ideas over the years about prison reform and what it should be, and there should be some more aspects to it other than just the passage of time.
Okay.
So, I guess I did a little funniness business with the word, but being reformed in prison is what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. I know where you're going with this now.
Yeah.
All right, so I think what you're trying to get me to go into is prison should be similar to a reform school. So while you go into prison, in my opinion, it's just a personal belief, and I think that you should have to achieve something. So if you don't have a GED or some high school equivalent diploma, regardless of your time, you must achieve that prior to your release date. If you have that, you must achieve either a community college associate's degree, or you must achieve a passage through some trade school, some in-prison trade school or skill set. So when you come out of prison, you're not sitting idle. You have the ability to generate income for yourself and support yourself.
Right, because there's really two aspects to that. If you're a prisoner sitting in prison, you have a lot of time on your hands.
Sure.
You could waste that time by just sitting there or shanking somebody or doing worse, or you could do something to make your life better.
Right.
Not just your life, the life of everyone around you. But also, prisons are a reform system. They should make people, they're supposed to reform people.
Absolutely.
The people who come out should be somehow better than when they go in. And we always hear, the phrase today, you go to prison to learn to be a criminal.
Sure.
If you want to learn to be a criminal, go to prison.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. And so, what are we getting for our $34,000? Are they getting some substantial benefit while they're in there that's going to make their behavior altered so that they're productive citizens, or are they spending their time in prison further aggregating what they've negatively been taught to do in the first place?
Right.
And so for $34,000 an individual, I personally expect them to get some type of rehabilitation.
34 grand a year. How does that compare to going to college? Coincidentally, it's pretty
similar,
close. Yeah.
Pretty similar.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's something to contemplate. Do you guys think that it's important to rehabilitate prisoners?
Yeah.
Or should it just be strict punishment?
Yeah. What do you think the metric should be to measure is somebody reformed or not? I would certainly suggest it's not the passage of time, and that's what we use today.
I think that's a good point.
So.
I do. I think that if you prove by your efforts that you can act differently or become productive, you can reduce the time that you have to serve.
Yeah, the prison system is here to serve the American public.
And I don't think that prison terms, if it's going to be anything short of a life term, should be based solely on a metric of time. I think that when you're incarcerated, you should be both incarcerated for a period of time and for an achievement goal. So while you're there, even if the period of time is elapsed, you're not releasable until you've achieved both aspects of your sentence.
Right. Because when you're in prison, nobody's saying you don't have a debt to society. We're just saying that maybe there's a better way to repay that debt than sitting in a cell.
Right, absolutely. And I think that comes to what you're going to do when you're outside of prison. Then.
Yes.
If you're busy, if you're in substantial gainful employment, you're really too busy to commit crime. And so I think that'll help with some of the recidivism or the repeat offenders that come out of prison. I think you'll have a reduction in that.
People come out of prison and think they have no choice to support themselves, no choice to survive other than to commit more crimes.
Right.
And that certainly is not something that we should encourage.
I agree. Absolutely. So I think we pretty much covered what we wanted to get into. And we appreciate you guys watching. And like we said before, if you could help out by liking and subscribing, it would mean a lot to us.
Yeah,
and put your comments down below about what you want us to talk about next. If there's a hot button issue you want to hear about, go ahead and let us know. Yeah. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Eric.